Welcome to our Education Insights webinar on addressing the digital divide, co-hosted by the Consortium of Florida Education Foundations and the Florida Philanthropic Network. I'm Bill Hoffman, and in addition to being the FPN consultant, I'm moderating this webinar today. Next slide. We have over 200 folks registered for this, so everybody is muted. We do want to answer your questions. You'll see in your dashboard a section for questions. It's right there in the red box. As we go through the webinar, don't wait till the end. We're going to be addressing Q&A at the end, but just enter your questions. We'll be collecting them and then addressing the panelists at the end, hopefully having enough time to answer all of your questions. Right now, you'll also see in your dashboard that we have two handouts. One is a PDF of all these slides. The other is a list of links and resources that our panelists have compiled, along with some general resources that we want to share with you. All this is going to be emailed to you later, but if you want to follow along, feel free to download those handouts now. We'll also be emailing a link to the recording of this, along with those slides. So let us start by hearing from one of our hosts. I'd like to introduce Mary Chance, President of the consortium, to give us a few opening words.
Thank you, Bill, and welcome everyone. I'm glad you could be with us for this important discussion this afternoon. I think most of you who've registered today have heard of the Consortium of Florida Education Foundations, but we represent the education foundations aligned with almost all of Florida's countywide school districts. Together, they raise about $83 million a year to power student potential and teacher potential, innovate learning, and celebrate success in our schools. This year, of course, along with everybody else, they've been figuring out how to do their programs in a different context, taking them virtual quite often, hybrid, or in some instances needing to hibernate or think of new ways to support students and teachers. Next slide, please, Chris. Since the moment that schools shut down last March 13th, a number of our folks have stepped into this digital divide and really tried to respond, find out where, what devices were needed, hotspots, and figure out new ways to support teachers who are now working from home with both technical support and help for the new resources they need to teach in a new way. Two of those members you'll be hearing from today. Our Education Foundation Palm Beach will be part of the story. You'll hear about the Palm Beach community, and then you'll be hearing from the Hillsborough Education Foundation. So we're delighted to be learning with you. There's a lot to learn in this topic, and it's become really important for a lot of us this past year. So thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Mary. Appreciate it. And now our other co-host, Ashley Dietz, the President and CEO of the Florida Philanthropic Foundation, or Philanthropic Network.
Thank you so much, Bill, and thank you to Mary. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you to our members as well for joining for this really critically important conversation. Next slide, please. Digital inequities are not only impacting our students, but other Florida residents as well. This has only been intensified and now magnified because of the pandemic. How are these inequities affecting social justice, access to online education, and access to telemedicine, just to name a few? I'm interested to learn how our discussion today will impact these areas with our members and where they're focused, and how this data can help inform how funders make future investments in this space. And back to you, Bill. I'm looking forward to a really robust conversation today.
Thank you much, Ashley. You can see here the goals of the webinar. As Ashley said, this is certainly an education issue, but it's also an issue for telemedicine. It's an issue for working from home. It's an issue about connected communities. And our members and our funders are concerned about all of these various areas. We're taking sort of a twofold approach to this. First, we're going to be talking about how do you measure the issue? How do you frame what the digital divide is? And then we're going to look from 3 regions in Florida who've been collaborating with funders, with providers, with nonprofits, and in some cases with municipalities and utilities to solve the problem with a different approach in each of those regions. And then, of course, we're going to answer your questions. So again, feel free to enter those in as we go through. I want to start though with a poll, just to get a little bit of sense of, for the folks who are on here, what you're doing in digital equity. So right now we're going to pull up the poll. If you would select where you're at on this. And give it just another minute and 10 seconds. And Chris, then if you could close the poll. And well, it's pretty evenly spread out. Almost a third are interested in learning more. A little over a quarter are currently investing or administering programs. Great, interesting. Okay, very good. So let's start by having a conversation about what the issue is beyond some of the common perceptions of that. For that, we've got the Patterson Foundation, who's been working on this through their Digital Access for All initiative. We've got Lori Stryker, who is the consultant in charge of the Digital for All initiative with the Patterson Foundation, and John Ferguson, who is one of the fellows for the foundation.
Well, good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity. And I think it's very exciting. As I looked at all the attendees today, the mix of people on the call is really a wide berth of both foundations and education foundations and members of FPN. So I think it's a wonderful time to learn together. And so let me start with a little bit about the Patterson Foundation. First slide, please. The Patterson Foundation is not a grant-making foundation. We invest in people, organizations, communities, in supporting really collaborations. And then based on those collaborations, we consider what are the gaps and work among the community members to figure out the best way to address those. We're a 4-county region, about 700,000 people, with Charlotte, DeSoto, Manatee, and Sarasota counties are our 4 counties. Let's talk about what the digital access and why did we take this up? And I think this kind of word cloud did it for us, is this whole increasing amount of impact for digital access, whether it's employment, education, which is the focus of today, but whether you're applying for a job or you're accessing a social service, or we saw with the rollout on signing up for the shots with the virus, there's an increasing expectation that people have this access. And our interest is in ALICE families, the asset limited families and communities, to see how they are faring with this move to this digital access for all, which has been happening over time. We just think COVID exacerbated it, but we're not going back. So next slide. Our approach has been not to go directly into the programs areas like funding computers or access, connectivity, and those kinds of expenditures. And a number of people from our region are on this call today, and many of them have been funders, both for nonprofits and for school children, healthcare, and to help on the digital access issues. We took the exploration approach. When we talked about digital access for all, it's such a big one. We wanted to figure out, what does it really mean? Learning who cares, learning who's doing what. So we talked to national and state organizations, numbered 20 or more of them, over 50 leaders in schools, libraries, county, economic development, nonprofits, to look what they're doing. And we shared those findings in several of what we call webversations. And now we're to the point of figuring out where are the best opportunities for collaboration. So with that, I'm going to quickly turn it over to John Ferguson to talk to you about the frameworks that we have emerged through our review and research, because that, as I say, is our approach. How do we look at this big, very complicated picture? So John?
Thank you, Lori, and thank you, Chris, for advancing. You can see here, we're going to go into the abridged version of this because through all those interviews and research that we did, there's tremendous amounts of information that you actually have access to in the link provided by Chris earlier today. So you'll have access to that. But in all these conversations, digital divide and digital equity boils down to three fundamental elements, and that's connectivity, devices, and skills and support. And we'll dive into each one of those individually, but it's important to note that all three are critical in allowing for a seat at the table. And without that, if you think of it as a three-legged stool, if any of those stools are broken, it's awfully hard to sit, and it's awfully hard to be able to move forward and do many of the things that Lori mentioned. It's very difficult to do pretty much anything without a clear digital connection these days. So next slide, please. Let's dive into connectivity first, and this is really just the ability to access the internet, right? And there's four main areas of this, starting with availability, and that's, is it even available in your area? For many of us, this is a no-brainer, and it is, but there are places in Florida and throughout the country where internet access is simply not available to folks, which is why hotspots and other means become important. Another issue is affordability, and that's, maybe it's available, but can you afford it? Right, there's a lot of different lower income price points for this through Comcast and T-Mobile and some of our other providers in the region, but it doesn't guarantee that a family will qualify or that a family will be able to do that. And then, is it reliable? We've all been on a call likely where our internet has been unstable or we haven't been able to share video and experience sessions like we're all in here together today. So especially in the education setting, when it comes to reliable internet, is very important to be able to complete your studies no matter what age group you are, from pre-K all the way through college. And then, considering other aspects like telemedicine, telehealth appointments are vital to have a reliable internet connection and be able to trust that. And then the speed. Speed helps determine how quickly and how efficiently you can do whatever it is that you need the internet to do. So the lower the speed, the more likelihood that there will be challenges that you may not be able to overcome as quickly as your counterparts. Next slide, please. Devices is the second leg of that stool, and devices are pretty simple, really, but is it capable of doing what you need it to do? It's about the right device for one's needs, not just any device. Right? I often say a MacBook Pro might be a little bit much for a second grader, but a Chromebook may not be able to do absolutely everything that you need to do if you're a graphic designer. There's a lot of different elements there. And then the same access for devices, when it comes to affordability, that's always going to be a challenge, but accessibility is the real one here. There's a lot of great programs out there that provide families with a laptop at no or low cost, but if you have a family of 5 and you have 1 or 2 devices, can everyone get on the device when they need to? And that's a really important element as well. Next slide, please. And finally, skills and support. This is a really critical element here. You may be able to connect to the internet, you may have a device to do it, but do you have the digital literacy, those basic digital skills that you need to be able to navigate today's society? Right, to be able to build those skills and the ongoing support. There are several organizations in each of these 3 elements that work on this. Everyone On has a great offer locator tool, and these are in those resource packets as well. PCs for the People works with devices, and with skills and support, North Star, based in Minnesota, has a wonderful digital literacy and skills building training modules, some of which are free, some of which are available at cost. But that ongoing support is absolutely vital to success. Next slide, please. So at the local landscape today, you're going to hear from three different areas that are going to be really insightful to what they've done that's been successful. There's a lot of examples on the local scale in our 4-county region, but I want to highlight one aspect here, which is the rural versus urban challenges. Throughout Florida, we have several of both communities, and it's very important to understand that the two face very different issues, right? With rural, it's typically an availability issue, right? The infrastructure simply isn't there in all cases, and it can be difficult and very expensive and not necessarily cost effective to build that infrastructure. And then in urban settings, especially in very dense downtowns with low income areas, it can be very difficult to afford The access to the infrastructure may be there, but the affordability is not. And so we'll go into the bright spots here through the other presenters that you'll hear from shortly. Next slide, please. One other thing to point out for the local landscape when it comes to connectivity, to really show you about the availability issues in the 4-county region that the Patterson Foundation works in, which is Sarasota, Manatee, DeSoto, and Charlotte. You can see there's a good mix between urban and rural just in those 4. You can see here on the graph that Manatee County is one of the national leaders at 99.3% availability. But that middle bar shows how many actually have a subscription overall, and the green bar at the bottom shows how many Alice households have a subscription, meaning that they pay for internet access. And you can see in all cases, the number of Alice households is significantly less, especially in DeSoto County, which is a more rural area, but significantly less than the availability that each community experiences. Next slide. So for us, as Lori mentioned, we're at the point where we can start sharing our findings and really fostering that collaboration. She mentioned the webversations, of which we've had a few, and there will be more to come. Our newsletter is monthly, and it's a great way to stay in touch with the newest happenings around the digital atmosphere. And then we have a new one coming out in a little bit. You will have access to that in those files, and I encourage you to sign up for that to get that distributed if you'd like. We also have a brand new resource page on our website, which is in there as well. And so check out that website and that resource page. Everything that we have come in contact with as far as different reports and different reports and interviews are in there that can lend some really good insights, both from a numerical level that was done by our resource assistant, Kira Lewis, and then access to the file itself.
Thank you, John. Appreciate it. And again, any questions for John or Lori, please put them in the question box. Now we've got Randy Scheid, who's the Chief Strategy Officer for the Quantum Foundation, who's going to be talking about some work in the Palm Beach County area.
Thank you all and good afternoon. I hope you can hear me and see me okay. My name is Randy Scheid. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer for Quantum Foundation in Palm Beach County. And I appreciate the opportunity to talk about the project that we're involved in down here in the county. We have a number of partners that have been at the table with us since the beginning. Just want to acknowledge some of them up front, and I'll talk a little bit about them as we go into things. If you could just maybe hop back for me real quick on the slides there. I just want to give a little bit of background on Quantum Foundation and how we got involved in this project and sort of frame our thinking, if you will, on the digital equity issue that we have here in Palm Beach County. So as some of you may or may not know, Quantum Foundation is a health funder. Our mission is to inspire and fund initiatives that improve the health of our communities. We work exclusively in Palm Beach County. We've been here for 22 years. But historically, most of our work has been focused on health. We became connected to this opportunity last March at the onset of the pandemic when our CEO, Eric Kelly, was asked to join a countywide task force. And I'll talk about some of those partners that were involved there from the beginning on the next slide. But the first thing I just want to talk about a little bit is, the main question that we get is why is a health funder concerned about education and an education project, right? So 2 points. First and foremost, the ability to read at grade level when a student completes 3rd grade is one of the greatest indicators of long-term health and well-being of an individual. So education obviously is very important for us. And the second part is the pandemic itself has permanently shifted the means by which individuals and families access healthcare. There was a report from McKinsey that estimated that physicians saw between 50 to 175 times more patients via telehealth than they did during the pandemic. And they don't think that's going to change, right? So going forward, access to internet is going to be essential even to access healthcare, not just education. Next slide, please. So some of our partners here, the county itself really took the lead. We had the school district, who hopefully there's a representative on the phone today from their office. the Palm Beach County Department of Engineering. We had local business associations, folks from the private sector, as well as some nonprofit and community-based partners. There was 40 partners involved in the project from the outset, and the work does continue to this day, and it's still ongoing. But I'll just sort of bring you up to speed from where we are. Next slide, please. So the philanthropic partners that were involved, again, a lot of these foundations were here from the start back in March and April when these conversations first started. But one of the interesting things here when you look at this is the breadth and type of philanthropic partners. We have family foundations, we have local taxing districts like our Children's Services Council. You've got United Way, the Community Foundation for Palm Beach and Martin County, and even the Education Foundation of Palm Beach County here that helps our school district. So quite a broad representation from the philanthropic sector. And most of our work has been to help with initial convening and then some of the funding that you'll see in the next slide. And one thing as we're going on to the next slide here, please, I'll just note that there's a very thorough overview of the project and what had been accomplished from March until December of last year that's available on our website. And I believe it's also available as an attachment to this webinar, but it really goes a little bit further into the details here. So the last slide here, just talking about the countywide effort, and then I'm going to talk specifically about what Quantum Foundation did here locally. This just again, give you an idea of the scale of the project in terms of dollars. And you see the third, fourth, and fifth line down. That's where the philanthropic partners filled in, some of the other business partners, etc. And also the last line, the in-kind line item, which really shouldn't be understated. This can include anything from hardware, time. FPL was kind enough to donate, I believe, about 40 poles, which was extremely, I'm sure that's really expensive, and especially to do that on short notice. So a ton of involvement here, ton of resources at the table to do this countywide. Next slide, please. So now I'm going to talk specifically about the foundation's role from a programmatic perspective. I talked a little bit about the broader initiative that came together that our CEO, Eric Kelly, was involved in from the start. Now I'm going to talk a little bit more about a very specific program that we funded with a partner here who's working on the ground. And we are supporting this effort, I should note, with the Community Foundation of Palm Beach, Martin County as well. I'm not sure if anybody from that foundation's on the phone. If you are, hello. But this is just a quick overview of our involvement. Also want to acknowledge the work of Camden Baggs, our project manager for special initiatives. Really took the lead in researching, designing, and developing this model that you're going to see here today. So one of the things that we know on these large scale infrastructure projects that go through the whole county, communities of color are disproportionately left out on projects like this, right? They don't have the voice, they don't have the seat at the table. So what we decided to do was identify a couple key communities in the county that we could help, make sure that this onboarding and the shift to the digital world would be as seamless as possible. So we're working locally with a nonprofit called Community Partners of South Florida, and we provided funding for 3 community technology navigators, which is a term probably most of you are familiar with at this point. And I think there's actually a job description of what we developed that's also available through the webinar info. So each navigator will specifically work in one municipality in Palm Beach County. Again, these are historically marginalized communities that are generally left out of large-scale infrastructure efforts. In just a moment, on the next slide, I'm going to talk about how we identified these. But again, quickly, the purpose of the navigator, which you can see before you, is to provide technical support, case management, and various trainings for families and households to ensure successful implementation and improvement for residents' lives. The individual that's responsible for this, Nick Savage, along with Jamie Lee Bradshaw. I think both of them are on the phone today as well. They work very closely with the school district to know the timing. When is the school coming online? Who should be able to access the internet at that point? And they work back and forth, if you will, really sort of the on the ground eyes and ears to help families know that they can now access internet as need be. Next slide, please. This is a great slide. I love this next one. This was put together by our partners at the school district to figure out where are these disconnected households. And a lot of this data was put together from March, April, and May. The district first looked at free and reduced lunch dispersion throughout the county, and then using surveys and actually identifying where people, what schools were showing underutilization of the internet to access their class. They were able to hone in on a few target communities. We do have a countywide map as well. I won't show you that one, but I just wanted to show you one community in particular, Belglade, which is out towards the lake. It's a very rural area. Again, historically underinvested, continues to be marginalized to this day, unfortunately. So we now have a concerted effort with the school district and with our other partner to really focus on this community. And you can see they almost know exactly where to go. Those dots are not houses. They're aggregated data, but it gives the navigator in the schools a very distinct idea about what neighborhoods, what streets need to be prioritized. Next slide, please. It's just my last two. I'll talk about just some quick results to date there, which you can see in front of you. These numbers likely continue to grow. I think that the fact that we have a focused effort with the district and a number of other partners will only complement the sustainability of this effort. And then last slide, please. I'm just going to talk a couple challenges here as we're moving towards the what could potentially be a light at the end of the tunnel for the pandemic. Continued funding. A lot of the focus now, as you know, has gone to vaccinations, vaccination efforts. There's local hurdles with permitting and whether or not the right-of-way is accessible, different things like that. So those are just some challenges. You probably see those in your community as well. And with that, I'll stop and turn it over to the next presenter.
Thank you, Randy. Appreciate it. And our next region to hear from is the Hillsborough region. We have Kim Jowell, who's the president and CEO of the Hillsborough Education Foundation, and Maria Negron, who is the director of programs for the Children's Board of Hillsborough County. So thank you, ladies. I will turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. As we all know, Chris, if you want to go ahead and we'll keep going here with the slide. Thank you. March 2020, we all know our lives changed. On that day, we serve the 7th largest school district. Hillsborough County has 225,000 students. So when that pandemic hit, we knew that we had about 225,000 students that we didn't have any idea about their internet access. But we did know that the public access and accessing internet from the McDonald's and libraries was gone, and there was an issue for families. And although we knew major providers in our area were offering 2 months free as part of the FCC's Keep Americans Connected initiative, we were hearing that families were still not connecting. So we created a digital equity team whose focus was to learn what those barriers were that our families were really facing, and try to figure out some solutions for them. Some of those barriers existed even though that was free, but we know a lot of low-income families live in apartment complexes that restrict providers, so they didn't even have access to that provider. And just as we've heard today, we have areas in Hillsborough County that didn't even have cable lines going out to their areas. And if they had an outstanding bill, I could go on with the barriers that we were finding. And so our team was looking at multiple solutions to issues, making sure they range from putting a bus with internet access out into complexes, paying internet bills, advocating at apartment complexes, whatever it took. In the end, where we landed was the best option for us was to go with hotspots and pay for broadband internet individual for students. So providing that internet access. At this point too, I should say that our district had provided laptops to at least one per family. So as we heard already, that's not enough when you have a family of 3 or 5, but at least they had at least one device at this point. So that's why we opted to focus on internet. Once we had made that decision, though, it was not easy task to get hotspots. At that point, you probably all remember, if you started working from home, getting any kind of technology was pretty hard. So it took us up to at least 2 weeks to even get them. But thankfully, as an education foundation who's long served as an intermediary role between schools and families, we were able to move quickly and serve those families, and we were ready to go. So knowing that we were looking at an expensive task or expensive piece of broadband internet serving these students, we started asking for support from funders. And of course, the questions from our funders centered around, well, what do you need? What's the number? As I said, we had 225,000 students. The only real data point that we had at this point was that before COVID, we knew we had about 160,000 students that were on free and reduced lunch. So knowing that those families had limited resources, that was what our target was going to be. That was the number. And after about 6 weeks, our district was able to share that out of the 48,000 computers that they provided, only half of them had been accessed. So next slide. So early on, we learned that, well, it's not just about giving them the device. We don't know if it's because they didn't have access or because they didn't know how to use it. And so we learned early on that we needed to do both. We need to provide device, that access, and the skills and education. So with that, I'm going to pause here and turn it over to my co-presenter and one of our major funders of our digital equity work, Maria, from the Children's Board. Next slide, Chris.
Thank you so much. So my name is Maria Negron, and we represent the Children's Board of Hillsborough County, which is one of the Children's Service Councils for Hillsborough. So as Kim was describing while she was doing this work, on another level, we started calling all of our funded agencies. So basically, if you're not familiar with a Children's Service Council, we collect local property tax revenue and then reinvest those dollars in agencies that serve children and families. And in Hillsborough County, our focus is in prevention work and families with young children. And so at the time, we were funding about 60 different programs, and we got on the phone and called them all to find out what their response was to serving families, and we wanted to understand the needs and the trends as they heard it from families. And over again, it didn't matter what type of service they were contracted to provide, they were faced with hearing about the challenges of e-learning and parents not understanding, or caregivers not understanding, you know, how to help their child through school, how to use the district approved e-learning tools. And so that led us to do two things. One is we asked all of our funded agencies to do technology assessments with all of their families, because while the providers were telling us that they were going to adapt and shift to a virtual model, it didn't mean that their families were going to be able to access them if they didn't have the technology that was needed. So we made sure that all of our agencies did assessments with their families to make sure that they developed a way to continue to serve them even if technology was a barrier. The second thing we did was collaborate with our school district. So we called them first and foremost. We have a great relationship with them, told them what we heard was happening, and we had this idea that we potentially could find a provider in our community. And at that time, we knew about the Hillsborough Education Foundation, but did not have a contract with them at this time. So we were going to be releasing for competitive application funding to do a few things, to work in collaboration with the school district, which meant getting direct referrals from them in order to go and visit a family home to do an assessment of their technology. So what did they already have? if they already had technology, was it enough? And the other piece of it was to assist the child as well as the caregiver with technical assistance, because the families needed to understand how the e-learning tools worked in order to help their child submit their homework on time, for example. So both the child and the caregiver needed the tech support. And then last but not least, the program would be able to purchase the type of device that the family needed in order to be successful with e-learning. So Hillsborough Education Foundation applied, and one of the strengths of their application was that they had a plan in place already for connectivity. So, so that was huge. So they were awarded, and we quickly got to work and got that contract out, and they have they started as soon as they were able. So very impressive how quickly they were able to get everything up and running, and now we're able to collect data. So the idea is that they're sending out a specialist, they're doing this work, understanding the needs. I think now the opposite is happening. I think they went out to assess technology needs, but they're also assessing other needs from those families. But with the additional data that they receive, we're going to be able to think about, you know, how do we continue to fund this in the future? I don't think that this is a one-time grant. I don't think that this is a temporary solution. I think we have to look at this in the long term, and so we're happy to be partners in that. Thank you, Kim.
Thank you very much. So as Maria said, with the Children's Board funding, we were able to hire a program coordinator and what we call 3 e-learning coaches, which is similar to Randy's navigators. And our e-learning coaches are actually going to homes. They're, for the most part, if they'll let us in. And we're providing that individualized coaching after the assessment is done. We are setting up general computer, setting up the computer and providing operating skills. We also do a deep dive into how to navigate our district's online learning platform. We use Canvas. And what we've learned is, to give you an idea of the complexity of some of this, every teacher that a child has creates their own Canvas page. So it looks different. So it's quite overwhelming for even technically savvy parents. But if you can imagine, you know, our ESOL parents and what they're up against looking at that. So we do go in, make sure we know that a parent engaged in their child's learning has better outcomes. So that is part of what we're trying to do, is make sure the parents are equipped. That's our first step of addressing the issue, is parents know where to find the notifications, assignments, and grades. We also provide written resources both in English and Spanish, and we have bilingual e-learning coaches. We provide on topic-driven webinars and then open question time during those Zoom calls as well. And then our e-learning coaches are also checking in on these families. And what we're finding, as Maria had stated, we are, this funding is restricted to K through 5, and we are working with e-learning students. And so we're working with some pretty unique family challenges, a lot of homelessness. So my team feels a lot of value in what they're doing and moving the needle. So next slide. One of the things I'm not going to I'll just be open and honest about this. I was super glad that the Children's Board actually put the outcomes that they expected into the proposal, because this is a challenge, I think, that, well, for many funders to come up with needle. There are so many needles that can be moved, and we know that while we are serving the individual child, we know that the families are being impacted. Now they have internet access, they can participate in, health, government assistance, work, employment opportunities. All of those things become more available and accessible to families. So our first serve of students, these are the 4 outcomes that the Children's Board gave to us. We actually have the whole logic model, 4-page long, of the detail behind each of these that we provided, so you all can spend some more time looking at that. But I wanted to share with you what this particular grant is focused on. And then the next slide is another source of outcomes that I found in doing some research that I thought was helpful. It goes from, the whole realm of from the family side of it. And so that I included as a handout also that I thought might be resourceful for everyone. So the next slide, and my last slide. I just wanted to make sure to round off this with saying this is not just an e-learning or pandemic issue. The pandemic exacerbated the long-time existing homework gap. Students without access to internet or are dependent on cell phones, so I'll be clear, that's not a device, right? Adequate device. We know that they perform lower on a range of metrics, including digital skills, grade point average, standardized test. And these students will also be less interested in STEM related careers. And we all know how badly we need young people interested in those career fields, especially during COVID. Hillsborough Education Foundation is definitely making a long-term commitment to closing the digital divide. We know the lack of digital access is compounding existing gaps and causing disproportionate learning losses for students. And these deficits will affect not only individual students' futures, but all of our futures. Your handouts include these two reports that I have on the slide, showing the potential learning loss of students and the related potential impact to our GDP. So it's impacting all of us. So our commitment includes looking for solutions that will take legislative action to really, truly close this digital divide. So thank you very much, Bill, for the opportunity to share.
Thank you, Kim and Maria. And as you'll see in your PDF, you'll have contact information for everybody who's speaking today. Next up, we have Upendo Shabazz, who is the Regional Vice President for the Palm Beach region of the Allegheny Franciscan Ministries, to share some deep work that they've been doing.
Thank you, Bill, and good afternoon, everyone. I just want to give just a little bit background about Allegheny Franciscan Ministries. We are a Catholic-based grant maker. Since 1998, we have granted over $100 million in grants. We award about 200 grants a year, ranging from $500 to $900,000. And our grant periods can range from 2 months to 3 years. I share this information as context because the grants we give are only a part of our story. The human and social capital we bring to bear is equally important, and one of the reasons why I am happy to share the Lincoln Park Smart Neighborhood story with you. Next slide. So I want to share just a little bit before we get into the Lincoln Park Smart Neighborhood story is that in 2014, Allegheny Franciscan Ministries decided to do some place-based work in particular communities throughout Florida. And so we launched the Common Good Initiative. It's a focused, community-driven approach to creating healthier communities. Through it, our vision is to have safe, healthy, and more connected communities. We work with members of the community in Waimama, Overtown, and Lincoln Park to address the priorities that you see before you. And let me just clarify something. We did not go into these communities and say, these are the priorities we want you to work on. We actually worked with the communities for them to identify the priorities they wanted to work with us on. All 3 communities represent the digital divide in the context of having no or limited access to Wi-Fi or broadband services. All 3 common good communities have prioritized jobs and economic stability. And without sufficient, adequate, quality internet access, the strategies to improve cannot be fully realized and sustained. Next slide. So what is a smart neighborhood? It uses information, communication technologies to increase operational efficiencies, share information with the public, and improve both the quality of government services and citizen welfare. It builds a sense of connectivity and security with an increased desire to live and work within the neighborhood. In May of 2019, Fact Tank reported that 26% of adults living in households earning less than $30,000 a year are smartphone dependent. And what that basically means is that they own a smartphone but do not have broadband internet at their home. So the smart neighborhood is very important to communities like Lincoln Park. It helps the residents, it helps build business development in the community, professional networking, increases interactions with the government, as well as connections to health and human services, and of course, education, which is very important on this call today. Next slide. So a little bit about Lincoln Park. Lincoln Park is a historically marginalized community. It is about 2.5 square miles. located in Fort Pierce, a community in Fort Pierce with a little over 10,000 residents. Lincoln Park is racially made up of 91% African American, 6% white, 1% Hispanic, and 2% other. 57% of the residents live below poverty, and the average median household income in Lincoln Park is a little under $16,000, compared to St. Lucie County, which the median income is about $42,000. And 26% of the residents in Lincoln Park are uninsured. So that kind of gives you an idea of the community that we decided to invest in. In addition, our partners include the City of Fort Pierce Utility Authority, and St. Lucie County government. Now I'm going to say this, timing is everything, truly everything. We began this work in Lincoln Park in 2014, and one of our first investments was the Lincoln Park Revitalization Coordinator position. This was a position that we embedded in the City of Fort Pierce to really have a focused view of Lincoln Park and trying to align and leverage everything that the county and the city was trying to do. And so through this investment with the Lincoln Park Revitalization Coordinator, one of the outcomes we wanted to see happen is that Lincoln Park had Wi-Fi. And so there were many attempts to bring this to fruition with startup conversations with AT&T, Comcast, everyone on. However, the vision for what we were trying to do was not fully realized until we were asked to the table. And I say that because FPUA was actively considering a smart city initiative to enhance the quality of life in Fort Pierce. And I share this with you is because we have been in the community since 2014, engaging the community, convening the community, talking to stakeholders. And so we have gotten a reputation of getting things done in this community. And I also will share with you that as it relates to FPUA in Lincoln Park, is FPUA is the utility monopoly in Fort Pierce. Now, having said that, FPUA has a not so good reputation in the Lincoln Park community. And also Lincoln Park is located in prime redevelopment right now for the city and county. So the Common Good Initiative, I would say, was the right partner to build community consensus for this project. Additionally, this opportunity is sustainable as it will result in attracting new businesses, creating jobs and increasing employment, hence supporting the priority goal for the smart neighborhood for Lincoln Park, which is build community infrastructure and capacity. And secondarily is to also create quality jobs and livable wages. Next slide. So I won't go into detail on this slide, but what I want you to know, this is a $1.2 million project. And it is going to happen in 6 phases. We are now at the stage of phase 3, but what I want to raise up is that phase 5 is actually going to happen sooner than August 2021. We anticipate that all of the Wi-Fi sites will be open, and it's more than 2 at this point. We've negotiated for an additional Wi-Fi site in the Lincoln Park community. And so that's happening as we speak with regards to putting the Wi-Fi spots in the community sooner than August. Additionally, we are looking at, and this doesn't happen in none of these, in any of the phases that you see before you, but it adds to the value of the sustainability is also including smart lighting. And this is basically photo cells on top of light poles that increases, city sensors, public Wi-Fi, and actually creates more of a better connection. And that's going to happen along the way. That's not part of this package, but that will happen after this first 6 phases happen, thus increasing the smart neighborhood. Next slide, please. As I stated earlier in the presentation, is that FPUA doesn't have the best reputation in Lincoln Park. And one of the many asks in this partnership is that the Common Good Initiative assists them in engaging the residents. So to date, they've participated in several community pop-ups. In addition, they've themselves facilitated community surveys via on the ground, literally being in the community, talking and engaging the residents, as well as phoning businesses and residents. Basically, at the end of the day, the residents will be how this project will be sustained. They will need to buy into this idea, which starts off with free Wi-Fi. That's really the first engagement. And then enrollment into broadband services, which will be offered at a competitive rate. So starting early with engaging the community is very important. In addition, FPUA will start training the residents on how to access the Wi-Fi services and do digital literacy, as we've heard earlier. Next slide. And so when we think about the community impact, again, this is the Common Good Initiative is Allegheny Franciscan Ministries' place-based effort in this community. And our goal has been to be in this community for 7 years, but hopefully everything that we're investing in will be sustainable as we leave, such as the smart neighborhood. And so we anticipate that it's setting up a 30-year infrastructure. Definitely have broadband speeds that are very high. As we know, especially if you have many laptops, smartphones, or any other device in your home, you're going to need higher speeds to accommodate that. And again, public Wi-Fi, bringing the community out. Our whole place-based effort is about engaging the community, giving them a voice. Positioning Lincoln Park to be a smart neighborhood. Again, this is a traditionally marginalized community, and right now we're creating that capacity for this community to have new businesses, new homes come into the community, as well as improving access to educational opportunities. And lastly, we are setting up this community to actually have broadband and its competitive rates. And actually, in working with FPUA, we will have a roll-in of a very discounted broadband rate for the residents. And lastly, what I will tell you is that, again, we've been in Lincoln Park since 2014, and we have made significant investments in different other projects. And many of the projects that we've invested in aligns very nicely with the smart neighborhood, such as the 10 nonprofits that we have sent through our Lincoln Park capacity building project. They are in the community, and then not only do they benefit from broadband, but they also, their clients benefit from that. Then we have Way to Grow Lincoln Park is creating 10 businesses on the business corridor, so they're going to benefit from that. And then we have this new outdoor engagement space that's created by the people in the community that will have this free Wi-Fi. So that's some examples of some of the work that we've done with regards to creating this smart neighborhood concept for Lincoln Park. Thank you.
Thank you, Pendo. Sounds like people need to start moving to Lincoln Park if they want to be connected. I'm going to ask the other presenters to pop up as well. Again, if you have a question, please put them in the question box. We've got a few already, but if you have one, that's fine. We'll answer as many as we can. First, I'm just going to throw up to anybody who knows this, and that is, what resource do you use or suggest for rural communities that do not have a strong Wi-Fi system available? Any rural resources?
Bill, this is Kim. In our rural areas in Hillsborough, that's why we had to go. That's why we chose to go with the hotspots, because we knew that the lines weren't getting out there, and that was the most affordable way and quickest way to get them access. There are other much more complex, above my vocabulary ways to bring it, but with a lot of dollars also. So that's what we did.
Thank you. I was going to joke, stump the panel here, but I think the reality is that we're talking about infrastructure, which is often above the capacity of philanthropy. Randy?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, something similar. We've got, again, not knowing the technical details, this is where the schools come in and the engineering, but there's towers that are strategically placed around the community. They've got a basically an extender, if you will, that again, I'm not an engineer, shoots out a signal to a covered area, and if the house has the Wi-Fi connector there, it sort of does it digitally. It's a digital mesh network. I don't know the exact name of the equipment, but I can figure that out. But I'd have to ask our school district representatives.
So the next question, a couple of the initiatives have either navigators or coaches. Where do you recruit these individuals? Obviously in a short timeline because of having to be reactive. So Kim and Randy, I know you've got that in yours, like top 2 places where you get your folks.
Yeah, ours have to come from the community. That's first and foremost, one of the main things. They've got to be community, either residents or people that have worked there before, so they're trusted.
Yeah, I would say the same thing. That's what we chose from. We have some teachers or those who were interested in education were really helpful with that background.
And note, Upendo came up, one of your colleagues in Waimama, who I know is part of the Connected Community, is talking about how they created the mesh network.
Yeah.
And we'll be sharing that out with everybody with the slides and the resources afterwards.
They've done some great work out there. They should celebrate.
Yes, I'm familiar with it as well. It is great work. If we could get the slides again, our time is running out. We have a few more questions that we're going to send everybody the answers to. The other thing is, I noticed in the question box, there's some people who are sharing other resources. I would ask anybody who's on here, this is one of these, we're learning from each other. So if you've got some resources that you'd like to share with your colleagues, the panelists and the attendees, send them to Mary or myself. I'm going to show you our emails in a moment, and we'll make sure that they're included in the follow-up package to everybody. I shared that an email is going out, but in addition to that, the consortium has on their website, where that arrow is, a link. It will be in the next day or so to a recording, and within the next 48 hours, we'll have the materials out to everybody with more details. Next slide. Consortium is also working on a research project where they're collecting, this is for distance learning primarily, best practices that folks have come up with. As with everything here, that where it says learn more and submit innovations, that here is a live link on your PDF. So if you're a teacher, provider, knowledgeable about any of these best practices, or just want to track what that research is doing, feel free to click that link and either share or ask whatever questions you have. Next, please. And here are a couple emails. So if you do have other resources you'd like to make sure get included in that packet, resources, thoughts, ideas, whatever it may be, you'll see Mary's and my email both, and phone numbers, but email us if you would, and we'll make sure that we get that incorporated into the final packet that goes out. So a final thanks to our panelists. As is usual, we had a whole lot more information than we practically had time for. We could have added another 30 minutes to this and still had a lot of deep information. So we really appreciate your sharing on this. And to all the attendees, thank you for your attendance. Be looking for our follow-up and have a great rest of your week.